on this program and called that report a fraud. And during a privileged routine call between attorneys, remember, they originally had a joint defense agreement. Well, Mueller conveniently omitted Dowd's statement that his request for communication was, quote, not only for the president, but for the country, and that he was not asking for any confidential information. That exculpatory evidence was totally ripped out. That is a classic Andrew Weissmann, Mueller's pit bull, his tactics. You may remember Sidney Powell's book, License to Lie. Weissmann, on multiple occasions, had withheld exculpatory evidence in the past. Why was he ever appointed? And that's not all. Let's not forget Mueller's 9-minute-long diatribe just last week when the media got all ginned up and they were full of hope and fear, hope and anticipation that they finally got the president. Well, that ended up being debunked a few hours later because, in fact, for the DOJ policy, indicting a sitting president was never a consideration. And Mueller had said that numerous times. So his press conference was an absolute contradiction of everything he had said. And remember, in a joint statement hours later, the DOJ, that means Attorney General Barr, the special counsel's office, they were forced to totally walk back and clarify the 9.5 minutes that Mueller was commenting. And they ended up reaffirming, quote, that the special counsel's report and his statement today made clear that the office concluded it would not reach a determination one way or the other about whether the president committed a crime. It had nothing to do with Justice Department policy of whether you can or cannot indict a sitting president. In other words, everything Mueller said in 9.5 minutes was false, it was phony, it was fake, it was innuendo, and Attorney General Barr pretty much bailed him out. And in that press conference, he really was begging Nadler not to testify or be subpoenaed because he knows that he has to answer questions from Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Devin Nunes, who will join us in a few minutes. He doesn't want to answer questions like, well, Mr. Mueller, when did you know there was no collusion? And when you found out, why didn't you end this witch hunt? And by the way, why did you only hire hardcore Democratic donors, including former Hillary Clinton attorney for the Clinton Foundation? Why would you ever hire a guy like Andrew Weissmann, who got tens of thousands of Enron accounting execs fired and then lost in the Supreme Court 9-0, and then had 4 Merrill executives put in jail for a year, and that was overturned by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals? Why we would appoint somebody like Weissmann, known for atrocious conduct, actually attended Hillary Clinton's so-called victory party on election night. Didn't work out well. So the pattern is clear. What we see now time and time again, the special counsel manipulates information to unjustly impugn a duly elected president of the United States. And by the way, if Mueller had time for taxi medallions and loan applications and FARA violations and so forth, why didn't he have time for the dirty Russian dossier that Hillary Clinton paid for, that's full of Russian lies and disinformation that actually was used to influence the American people? No excuse for that. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction on the Trump campaign's part. There was no conspiracy. All the Trump haters on Mueller's team, well, they just reverted to Plan B. That's a 448-page smear campaign. They created a document definitely intended to fuel even more lies, more conspiracy theories from Democrats and, of course, their allies in the abusively biased and corrupt media mob. It was a political hit job from the beginning through and through. And the president was right. It always was a witch hunt. And as far as Mueller's concerned, mission accomplished. We're going to have more monologue in just a moment. But first, joining us now with this huge, big breaking news report from the Hill, we have John Solomon. Basically, they knew certain facts. They had exculpatory evidence. They selectively chose what to put in and what to omit. That's and right. It follows, perfectly into what we saw Mueller have to do last week, clarify and walk back everything he had said in that 9.5-minute, diatribe of his, which was a political roadmap for impeachment.
Yeah. Listen, what is certain tonight, Sean, is that this is a significant and, quite frankly, inexplicable omission from Robert Mueller's report. He goes out of his way to try to paint Konstantin Kilimnik as somehow Russian, and therefore every contact that Paul Manafort had with him has to have a sinister twist to it. And you now find out that in his possession were FBI 302 interview reports and more than 200 pages of emails and cables in which the State Department referred to Klemennik as one of their most sensitive intelligence sources, as someone who was one of their most reliable intelligence sources on what was going on inside the Ukrainian government, someone who they were so concerned about protecting that they didn't put him in cables because they were afraid that WikiLeaks one day would get them and his identity would get out. This was a sensitive U.S. intelligence source, and Bob Mueller did not take the time to tell the American people that side of the story. I don't know how to explain why he admitted it. He's not giving us an answer tonight, but this is going to raise some serious questions about the credibility of the report, and it's not the only omission or factual error that's starting to surface.
Right. So as these factual errors become known and certain things were spun a certain way, and then you look at the team Mueller hired, I never understood why Weissman, why Jeannie Ray, why only Democratic donors. The president raised that issue many, many times.
He did.
And the president raised the question of conflicts of interest. On a personal level, the day before he was appointed special counsel, Donald Trump said no when he requested the job as the FBI director. And then, of course, he had issues with Donald Trump relating to some golf course issue.
Yeah. Well, think about it. We've been told that the reason they wrote this report was to give America transparency, the final say on what the evidence shows. And in that effort at transparency, we only get a half-truth, at least on Konstantin Klemennik, and I fear on several other people that are identified in the report. And when you go through what I have, these several hundred pages, and you look at what was really being said about Klemennik, then you look at the way he's portrayed. Every slight, every omission is designed to make him look more nefarious than he is. If this guy was a Russian asset, he doesn't get into the United States in 2016. He would not have this level of access to the senior officials of the State Department. He wouldn't be presenting Obama State Department peace plan long before he gives it to Donald Trump if he wasn't trusted. Somebody didn't do their job, or somebody made a conscious decision to ignore this, but neither one of those are a good alternative for the American people.
And we also now know that Carter Page was an asset for U.S. intelligence.
Right.
4 years he was working with and cooperating with U.S. intelligence.
And had recent contact in March of 2016, just as he was being named to the president's campaign. How does that stay a secret for so long? Somebody didn't want us to get a complete picture. That's what.
John Solomon, as usual, great reporting. This is going to get bigger and bigger. Now, despite these obvious flaws, this bias, this deception in Mueller's report, the irrefutable fact that there was no collusion, well, of course, the rage Trump Democratic Party, they're just hell-bent on one thing only, and that's impeaching the president. They don't have a reason. They don't state a reason. But, of course, they get the assistance of the psychotic media mob's conspiracy theorist liars. And tonight, this is no longer a Democratic Party like of Scoop Jackson, even Joe Lieberman. Instead, it is now the party of anti-Trump rage and psychosis. And for some reason, even impeaching Trump apparently is not enough. We had Speaker Pelosi now apparently telling senior Democrats she'd like to see Trump behind bars. Based on no actual crime, she wants a political opponent locked up in prison. That happens in banana republics, beyond despicable behavior. And by the way, they would literally turn, in many ways, the USA into a country we would no longer recognize. Constitutional republic, equal justice under the law, equal application of our laws. But of course, Pelosi, I've been telling you, she is only Speaker of the House in name only. She knows the real speaker is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's calling the shots. Pelosi's desperately trying to appease this radical and extreme base of her party, as if she's not extreme enough. And make no mistakes, this new Socialist Democratic Party, they are out for revenge. They're not about solutions, making the country safer, more secure, more prosperous, more employment, raising the standard of living for you, we, the American people. They don't care about that. They focus on one thing only, and that is their rage, their obsession. Donald Trump, the president, lives in their heads 24/7, every second, every minute, every hour of every day. Take a look.
Donald Trump, as president, delayed, deflected, moved, fired, and did everything he could to obstruct justice. If he were any other person in the United States, based on what's documented in that report, he would be carried out in handcuffs.
Are you, Mr. Chairman, feeling any pressure from your members to at least open an impeachment inquiry?
Well, the question, let me put it this way. It may come to that. It may very well come to a formal impeachment inquiry.
Now, Nadler, who you just saw, other Democrats on the Hill, they're mounting what is now a fifth investigation into the Trump campaign and Russia collusion. This follows the FBI's 9-month investigation. They found nothing. The House Intelligence Committee investigation found nothing. The bipartisan Senate investigation found nothing. Mueller's 22-month witch hunt with partisan Democrats found nothing. And they're just attempting to literally haul in the same witnesses to answer the same questions and hire the same expensive attorneys for a fifth time. My advice, don't answer any of their questions. I plead the fifth. I've answered that question because it means dozens of private citizens shelling out thousands of dollars for these expensive Washington attorneys answering the same questions over and over again. This has now become a government abuse of power, plain and simple. They're now stealing from government workers who end up paying more than they make to pay for the legal fees that they accrued during this time. And naturally, mainstream media doesn't care. It's not their money. They're now working overtime to bolster the Democrat smear campaign. Look at the New York Times editorial page. They're so objective, they just featured a draft articles of impeachment against Trump over no charges, including multiple scenarios for how the Democrats can achieve their fantasy, their dream. This for them would be like manna from heaven, living heavenly waters in their soul and their solar plexus. But it's not going to happen. And ironically today, you also had simultaneously a top editor for the fake news New York Times saying that his paper was in no way anti-Trump. Oh, yeah, everyone just raises from the dead articles of impeachment over nothing. I told you in 2007, journalism in America, it is dead, it is buried. And look at the Pew Research report that we said to you, we reported last night. Lies, deception, conspiracy theories. This is now representing news. Tom Brokaw, are you really proud of that nut Rachel Maddow? The New York Times, the Washington Post, fake news CNN, 2.5 years of nonstop lying, conspiracy theories, and a hoax, all based on anonymous sources. So-called mainstream media, they're nothing but an extension, the propaganda arm, if you will, of the Democratic Party. Nothing more. They are never to be trusted. And by the way, the American people now get it. On this program, we focused on truth and justice. We went in a direction totally different. We didn't go with the 99.9% of the mob, and everything we've been reporting up to now has been proven true. Which brings us to some other breaking news from one of Mueller's top targets, and that is Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. He is now in the sentencing phase of his guilty plea as we speak. Now, Lieutenant General is desperately trying to fire his legal team. And hours ago, a federal judge actually blocked that request only on a procedural grounds measure, but it is a sign the retired war hero is preparing to withdraw his guilty plea. Now, keep in mind this. Flynn's plea was the result of a perjury trap. It was laid by Comey, it was laid by McCabe and Mueller. Remember, during his initial interview with the FBI at the White House, remember, he called the deputy director of the FBI and said, "Do I need a lawyer?" Andrew McCabe said, No, you don't need a lawyer. No, it's not like that at all. Okay, I just wanted to know. And James Comey, well, he bragged about how he would do something he'd never do in the Obama administration or the Bush administration. And he's boasting about setting up a man who served this country for 33 years and put his life on the line in wartime. And he's saying, we took full advantage of the chaos. We told them not to get a lawyer. They had already illegally unmasked him, and they illegally leaked raw intelligence. They knew exactly what was said in the conversation. They set a perjury trap from the get-go if, in fact, Lieutenant General Flynn didn't say the exact same thing they expected. Look at this.
You look at this White House now, and it's hard to imagine 2 FBI agents ending up in the sit room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration, in the George W. Bush administration, for example, or the Obama administration. And in both of those administrations, there was process. And so if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over.
So you tell him not to get a lawyer, then you set him up, then you brag about setting him up. What a jackass. Who treats a 33-year veteran like this? That's how we treat American heroes. We set them up. We tell them not to have lawyers. We pretty much say it's not an investigation and brag about it. FBI investigators already knew the answer to the questions. They already heard the tapes. And Flynn was surveilled and amassed by our own federal government, which was illegal. And McCabe and Comey both testified that Flynn still didn't appear to be lying, but he had to sign on because he was losing his house, he was out of money, and they were threatening to go after his own family, his son in particular. Because Flynn failed to perfectly recount the details of a years-old phone call, Mueller turns the screws on him in the hopes that he'll sing or compose, and Lieutenant General Flynn's life has been in ruins ever since. His finances have been wrecked, his home has been sold because of the legal fees, and he's facing real jail time for purportedly lying to investigators that didn't think he was lying. And tonight, my advice to General Flynn is this: get your new lawyers, move forward with your legal team, withdraw that plea, and fight this in court. Because you do not deserve the setup that was Comey and McCabe. That is a national, despicable, disgusting disgrace what they did to him. No collusion, no conspiracy from Trump or anyone on his campaign. An American hero's reputation should not be destroyed by people with power bragging about abusing that power on tape. It's a disgusting display of abuse of power. Here now, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Devin Nunes, and Fox News contributor Sarah Carter. You know, Congressman, I listened to Comey, what McCabe said to him, knowing he was illegally amassed, knowing they leaked the raw intelligence, and I'm saying, if America treats our heroes this way, we do not have a democratic republic anymore. He needs to fight it, withdraw the plea, and he needs to go after Comey and McCabe for setting him up that way. They abused their powers.
What I would say to this, Sean, is that in the future, when you look up the word dirty cop, if you have a fair internet and free internet, you will see the pictures of Comey and McCabe. These guys make Hoover look like a saint. I had actually never seen that clip that you just played, but it is absolutely despicable that the head of the FBI would think it's funny and cute to send over these FBI agents to go and interview the national security advisor for the president of the United States. And then they walk out of there and say, look, we don't think the guy's lying. But instead, what do? You double down. And I'll just, just closing with this, let's not forget, the biggest leak of all the leaks was the leak of General Flynn, the incoming national security advisor for the president of the United States.
That's a crime, is it not, sir?
Talking to the Russian ambassador. It is an absolute crime. They have 9 individuals who supposedly told the mainstream news media nothing was ever done to get to the bottom of that. Biggest leak in U.S. history.
Let me ask you, Sarah Carter, I know you've been investigating this all day. Do we know what the general has decided? I know he wants new attorneys. I think he deserves them. And I hope there's a defense fund that will pay for them. I know I'd like to see this guy get his house back, but is he now going to withdraw this plea after the statements of McCabe and Comey?
Well, I certainly think, Sean, they're considering that. I don't know that for certain. I know, talking to sources, this is possibly a consideration for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. And Congressman Nunes is absolutely correct when he talks about the kind of crime that occurred in January 2017 when his name was leaked to David Ignatius of the Washington Post. What's important here is that there were 9 individuals that apparently were senior government officials. And I would start with James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, who actually conducted the interview with Michael Flynn in January, and others, as well as Joe Pietka, who was the other FBI agent who interviewed Flynn in January. This is a highly classified piece of information. And when that information went into the Washington Post, Sean, the Russians knew exactly what phones our intelligence community was monitoring of then Ambassador Kislyak. And the story that John broke goes to show you how far both Robert Mueller, James Comey, Andrew McCabe were willing to go.
We now learned a lot tonight from John Solomon. Congressman Nunes, you know a lot more is coming. We're running out of time. Just give us a quick preview of preview of coming attractions in the days to come.
Well, there's clearly many problems with the State Department that we still are waiting to get to the bottom of. And I would just add, I don't want people to forget, the dirty cops were so busy looking at everything but themselves. Don't forget, they also leaked transcripts of the president talking to the Australian prime minister and the Mexican president. I mean, can you imagine this? These massive transcripts getting aired out for the whole public to see. And in the meantime, what are they doing? They're actually investigating the president and themselves instead of investigating themselves.
Thank you both. More as we continue about Nadler and Mueller straight ahead. He spoke to Laura Ingraham in Normandy, France earlier today about the special counsel, Robert Mueller. Let's take a look.
Do you mind if he testifies still? Before you said you didn't care. Mueller testified.
Let me tell you, he made such a fool out of himself the last time because what people don't report is the letter he had to do to straighten out his testimony because his testimony was wrong. But Nancy Pelosi, I call her Nervous Nancy, Nancy Pelosi doesn't talk about it. Nancy Pelosi's a disaster, okay? She's a disaster. And let her do what she wants. You know what? I think they're in big trouble.
By the way, it's hallowed ground. You think of those guys slam the beaches of Normandy, unbelievable courage so we could live free. All right, joining us now, 2 people that can answer a lot of pressing questions on these matters. House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows, former independent counsel Ken Starr. You know something? I don't like what Comey did, Mark, Congressman. I don't like what the lies now that are being exposed in the Mueller report. I don't like the selective editing. I don't like a lot of this, but it doesn't surprise me. Look at his team.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. In fact, the best day the Democrats had was just a few days ago when Bob Mueller did his press conference when he was leaving DOJ. That's the very best day that the Democrats have had and will have. I can tell you, as we start to look through the Mueller report, multiple omissions, multiple misrepresentations.
Exculpatory omissions.
Well, and even beyond that, you had John Solomon reporting tonight. There are other material facts that are just not accurate in the Mueller report. And so we've been preparing that he may come back. Jim Jordan and I are getting prepared. And I can tell you, the deeper we dive, the more problems we find.
Well, Mark Meadows, I read the transcripts of the Nellie Orr, Bruce Orr, Page, Strzok, all these closed-door testimonies, and I want Robert Mueller, I want him to testify. I want him to go and answer your questions and Jordan's questions. When did they know, for example, that there was no collusion? Why did he hire such an abusively biased team? Why did you hire Hillary's attorney? Why did you hire Andrew Weissman? Why did you have time for FARA violations and taxi medallions and loan applications and taxes, but you didn't look at the dirty dossier? Are those good questions?
Well, they're good questions, Sean, but I think here's the problem is within 60 days of them opening the investigation, prior to Bob Mueller coming on, the FBI and DOJ knew that Christopher Steele was not credible. The dossier was not true. And George Papadopoulos was innocent. And so when you look at that foundation, it's all built on really a foundation of sand, and that's going to start to show up very soon.
And Ken Starr, wouldn't the broad mandate that was given Mueller that allowed him to go off in all those other directions, FARA, taxi medallions, loan application, wouldn't it have been appropriate if you really want to get to the bottom of Russian influence, collusion even, Wouldn't you want to know about the dirty, bought and paid for dossier full of Russian lies disseminated to the American people to convince them to vote for Hillary before the election?
Of course you would. You want to know all the facts, including how did this all begin. Happily, as you know, Sean, we're going to get to the bottom of it. I have every confidence that we will, with the Inspector General's report and then with John Durham, the very respected United States Attorney. Here's one point I would make about Bob Mueller's statement that he had to clarify in the joint statement with Bill Barr, who, by the way, is doing such a good
Bill Barr
job.
saved his sorry you-know-what. Let's be honest. He really did. He bailed him out and he was being gracious.
I look forward to when Bill Barr can speak without the encumbrance of being the Attorney General of the United States, because I think we're going to hear a lot. But here's my fundamental point. In his statement to the American people, saying essentially, this is my farewell, this is the last thing I'm going to say, I hope it's not, I hope he will be subpoenaed if necessary, Bob Mueller said, I'm paying tribute to the integrity of the people who worked for me. He has put, by his own words, the integrity in play. 20 years ago, the integrity of the investigation I was charged with was put in play. And so what happened? I was summoned to testify. They didn't have to subpoena me. I was requested to testify, and I did. And that's what we need. There's so many questions. Congressman Meadows has mentioned them. John Solomon has mentioned them. You mentioned them with the John Dowd interview, which was so important earlier this week. We need to know the truth.
What do you both make, and Congressman, I'll start with you, of we already know what Christopher Steele's going to say. Because when push came to shove in an interrogatory in Great Britain and he was under the threat of perjury, he said, I don't know if any of this is true at all. It's raw intelligence, maybe 50-50, but it became the bulk of information to apply for a FISA warrant, which says at the top, verified, and he's saying to us it's an unverifiable document. Doesn't that mean Comey, Yates, and even Rod Rosenstein and anyone that signed that they did not verify it?
Well, it wasn't verified. Ken Starr is right. You actually look at the prosecutors and their team, and you start to judge the integrity of that investigation. But more importantly than that, it was not raw intelligence. It was made up. Sean, I can tell you it would be great if it was raw intelligence and just happened to be wrong. But actually, this was a fictitious story that everyone knew was fictitious, and yet they did nothing about it.
And Ken Starr, even the New York Times, they're catching up to the Hannity program. A little 2.5 years late, but, you know, better late than never. But they're suggesting that it was Russian disinformation the entire time, that Hillary Clinton paid for and the FBI paid for Russian disinformation.
Extraordinary and an absolute shame. It's a tragedy, and it borders on being a disaster. We've been through too much in this country with respect to the alleged collusion. That's a serious charge. We do know, and that's one of the things Bob Mueller did in fact establish in these indictments, the Russians interfered with our politics. But he's also established in his report that there was no collusion. That's what he was hired to find out.
Yeah, but we know real crimes were committed by Hillary, called the Espionage Act, with real intent to cover them up by destroying the subpoenaed emails, bleach bit, hammers, ending SIM cards. Congressman Meadows, people need to give you, Jim Jordan, credit, because those closed-door testimonies that were released by Congressman Doug Collins, wow, you guys did an amazing job when nobody was looking, and the American people need to know that. Thank you, sir. All right, thank you both. When we come back, you're not going to believe who is praising the president. We'll show you the tape. Dan Bongino, Larry Elder are next. Also later tonight, well, we have Bill Nye comparing the fight against D-Day to climate change. Are you out of your mind? What is wrong with these people? We'll explain. We'll try to explain. It's impossible to explain.
Remember those who fell, and we honor all who fought right here in Normandy. They won back this ground for civilization to more than 170 veterans of the Second World War who join us today. You are among the very greatest Americans who will ever live. You are the pride of our nation. You are the glory of our republic. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
An amazing speech by the president today, very moving, the 75th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. You know, you think about all these guys, they slammed the beaches of Normandy, waves of men going on those beaches, stepping over many dead bodies and injured soldiers, and still plowing through, knowing that so many of them were walking right to their death. But they did liberate Europe from the tyranny of fascism and Nazism. Amazing, the greatest generation. And that powerful remark by the president drew praise even from the hate Trump media mob. But I have a theory about this, but take a look.
It certainly does, John. I think this was perhaps the most on-message moment of Donald Trump's presidency today, and I think rose to the moment. And as he was talking about those men gathered behind him, he described them as being among the greatest Americans who have ever lived. I mean, that could not be more of a fact check true if we could have found one.
And deliver what, again, I believe was the strongest speech of his presidency. He went on to say, to talk about the remarkable life that was created by this generation.
I don't trust anything Acosta and Liberal Joe have to say. You know why? Because after 2+ years of lying and conspiracy theories, their ratings are in the sewer. And with all due respect, they're probably trying to just get them up. You can't trust a word they say. Anyway, joining us now, we have former Secret Service agent and, of course, friend of the program, Dan Bongino, with us, nationally syndicated radio talk show host Larry Elder. Larry, I see you laughing. I'm sorry. There's nothing they say, even a compliment at this point, that makes up for the lies and conspiracies of 2 years, 2+ years.
You're absolutely right. And I think, Sean, the reason they praised Trump, well, 3 reasons. The first is, obviously, it was a great speech. Well delivered, sincere, passionately delivered, and respectfully delivered. The second reason is they've defined him so low. They think of him as a caricature, as a moron, as a boob. So the bar is so low, all he has to do is show up on time, Sean, not blow his nose on his tie, and he's met their expectations. The third reason is, just as you pointed out, ratings. How many meetings do you think CNN and MSNBC have had since the Mueller report came down and their ratings have sunk like a stone? They know they got to reposition themselves to be slightly more fair. Maybe, just maybe, we ought not treat Donald Trump as a combination of Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. Maybe we ought to treat him as less than a combination of those 3 gentlemen, and that's what they're doing right now.
They can't, but Dan Bongino, they can't make up for this pattern of purposefully lying, manipulating, creating false hope, running with a hoax, conspiracy theory, with passion. They just wake up and hate this man.
No, they do. But the thing about the speech, and I think you kind of addressed it in your mini monologue there, Sean, was it was a pretty flawless speech in a situation where there's obvious bipartisan agreement that this was our greatest generation. So there's really nothing politically, because remember, Acosta and Scarborough, they're political figures. These are not media figures. If you believe that, seek professional help. I'm sorry, you've misinterpreted the situation. They're politicians. But there's no political victory for them, Sean, none to be had in a relatively flawless speech in a situation everybody agrees is recognizing the greatest among us. So what's the harm in it? They just say, oh, yeah, Trump did a nice job, and then tomorrow they'll be back to promoting the collusion hoax like they usually do.
Larry, maybe this is a little naive and dumb on my part, but let's just throw the question out anyway. What about maybe admitting you've been wrong, make a correction, tell your audience, we screwed up and we're going to fix things and we're going to really try and do the news now? They just double down on the next thing. Let's go for a 5th investigation, or let's look into Trump's taxes now. Let's change focus and start a new conspiracy.
Right. Well, they'll apologize when hell freezes over. They're not going to do that. They're going to go on to something else. But they're watching the same polls you and I are watching, and they're seeing that the majority of the American people do not want him impeached. The majority of the American people want to move on and want to deal with things that concern their lives, and they've got to reposition themselves. Otherwise, the ratings will still continue to fall.
And Dan, American people, we learned yesterday, they don't believe them anymore. Donald Trump has tattooed fake news all across the forehead of every one of these conspiracy theorists and liars.
Right.
John, they can't do anything right. Their rage at Donald Trump. This has been the gift of Trump. He doesn't back down. And he's got them to show the media. The media is to show the American people who they really are. They're political activists, nothing more.
And basically the propaganda arm of all things extreme, radical, democratic, socialist. All right. Good to see you both. Thank you. When we come back, there is an ISIS threat from the southern border. Trace Gallagher has a report. Bill Nye, well, he's literally the science guy, supposedly, comparing climate change to D-Day. It's unbelievable. Why are these people on TV? Why do people listen to them? We'll debate it straight ahead. Southern border intensifies. New report details a plot by ISIS to exploit what is a huge vulnerability. Fox News correspondent Trace Gallagher, he's live in our West Coast newsroom with the very latest. Trace.
Sean, these attacks were designed to cripple the U.S. economy, and a captured ISIS fighter who's a Canadian citizen says leaders of the terror group chose him because he was not known by his government to be an ISIS fighter, which gave him a better chance to get on board an airplane. The terror suspect says the plan was for him to use false passports and IDs to get on a flight from Syria to Puerto Rico and then on to Mexico, where a New Jersey man would smuggle him across the border into the United States and up to New York. He was then to get a job at a bank or financial institution, get behind the company's firewall, and sabotage it. The International Center for the Study of Violent Extremism, which spoke to the captured ISIS fighter, says, quote, "We often hear about terrorists trying to enter the southern border in political debate, but I rarely have come across a real case. It surprised me to hear this was a real plot by ISIS to exploit our southern border." Experts add that it's scary to think what an insider can do to a company because there are very few limits on the damage a rogue employee can cause.
All right, Trace Gallagher, thank you. You know, when there is such an attack, God forbid, or when other people are killed, one of the people that call walls immoral and people like Bozo, Robert Francis want to tear down the wall, when do they get blamed for what happens? Now, as today marks the 75th anniversary of D-Day, well, you have the activist news media naturally, well, using the event as an opportunity to push climate change and their agenda. Take a look.
Young people are very concerned about climate change. People of my generation and perhaps yours are where you're going to find climate change deniers. There's enormous opportunities. You know, I am always optimistic about this because tomorrow's the anniversary of D-Day. And it was, of course, there was tremendous loss and tremendous sacrifice. But it was part of this greater idea that we have a global problem and we're going to solve it.
Joining us now, co-host of the Five. Oh, he has two shows, excuse me. And, of course, host of Waters World on the Fox News channel, Jesse Waters. Fox News contributor Rachel Campos-Dovey. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
This is number
9.
Ay, ay, ay. What happened to zone defense? You're going to need.
They don't play that up in Wisconsin. Trying to solve the Hispanic conservative problem all by myself.
We are very proud of you, and we're very happy, and all your kids are happy and healthy, thank God.
Thank you.
I can't say what I just said off air. This guy's such an idiot. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how he gets airtime. Slamming the beaches in Normandy, stepping over dead bodies, saving a continent from fascism and Nazism, not exactly climate change.
No, but we finally found a war that liberals want to fight. The war on the weather, Sean. I mean, they've been AWOL on the war on terror. Now they want to take on the temperature. This guy's not even a scientist. He doesn't even have a PhD. All he is a huckster and a shock jock, and he's doing this for money. Give us all the money so we can fight climate change.
A doctorate in stupidity.
Right, and then everyone's going to die, so we need to save the world. It's a scam.
The men sitting behind the president today, they're obviously not going to fall for it. The people from the greatest generation aren't going to fall for it. The danger I see in it, and I say this as a parent, all of us have kids at this table, is our kids learn more about climate change than they do about American history. And Bill Nye is actually really popular with kids. My kids actually ran into him in D.C. They saw him in the Capitol, and they knew exactly who he was. So he has a lot more influence than you think, and especially because our education system doesn't teach American history. They actually think that he has.
No, they finally get to that in like 11th or 12th grade.
But think about how meaningless your life is to create fake wars to fight. I mean, why can't they maybe take on homelessness? clean up your backyard. Skid Row. Start with Skid Row.
Right.
Take care of that. Then maybe we'll give you some more responsibility later.
AOC is a product of this system and that's why she believes the world's going to end in 12 years. She is somebody
Well, if
who's
it's going to end in 12 years, why are we bothering with all the... Why don't we just throw a big party for 12
I agree,
years?
yeah.
I'm going to the islands. I'll see you guys later.
I'm going with him.
I'm not working.
Yeah, exactly. Why am I doing this? It's over in 12 years. I want to retire.
She doesn't believe it either. If she
we'll
did,
give Jesse a third show.
If she believed it, she wouldn't be driving SUVs and living in a penthouse with a pool. So she doesn't believe it either.
All right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Your numbers are phenomenal.
Thank you.
Great work. More Hannity. Closing thoughts next. The time we have left this evening, but we always make you a promise. We're going to hold those people that abuse power accountable, all of them. We will follow every detail, every fact. The cascade is coming. The avalanche will be here. Let not your heart be troubled. We will never be part of the destroy media, rage media mob. We'll be fair and balanced. And live from Paris.